In the late autumn of 2023, in the city of Briarfield, a man returned to a table he had not sat at in years, not because he had been away long enough to forget the city. He remembered it, in the way you remember something that shaped you before you understood what shape meant. The particular smell of the east side after rain, the way the old bridge on Mercer Avenue listed slightly to the right when the weight shifted. The sound his father made when he got home late and dropped his briefcase in the hallway. Careful not to wake anyone, a man who treated silence as courtesy even when nobody required it of him. Malik Brooks had been a child when his father began fighting with paperwork. He was 44 now, broad and measured, with the particular stillness of a person who has learned to be patient with systems, the way a mechanic is patient with engines, not because he loves the machine, but because he understands how it works and what it costs when it fails. He had come back to Briarfield for a reason. Leon Brooks had been a city infrastructure inspector, a man who spent his working life reading blueprints and site reports the way other people read novels, searching for the details that determined whether a thing was what it claimed to be. He had done this work without ambition for recognition, without interest in politics, without a friend in any corner of City Hall. What he had was his read on a document, and his ability to say plainly when a document did not match the structure it described. This capacity had destroyed him. In the spring of 2009, Leon filed a memo about the Mercer Avenue bridge. The concrete in two of the supplemental columns had been poured with material that did not meet the specification listed in the approved design. The drainage infrastructure beneath the bridge deck had been installed in a configuration different from the engineering drawings. The inspection report that authorized final payment described a completed project. The project was not complete, and the materials were not what had been specified and paid for. Leon wrote this down clearly and submitted it through the correct channel. 3 weeks later, he was put on administrative leave for what his supervisor's letter called procedural irregularities in the conduct of site assessments. A month after that, a quote attributed to a city official described him in the local paper as an inspector with a personal history of difficulty cooperating with project timelines. Nobody asked him for his side of it in print. The contractor was paid. The project was signed off. Mayor Preston Calder, in his first term, received credit for delivering infrastructure improvements on schedule, which was useful in the second election. Leon Brooks was eventually cleared of the procedural charge but never reinstated, and the clearing was done quietly, in writing, in a letter that went to his home address, and not to any record that a person looking him up would find. He died in 2016, with the word troublemaker still attached to his name, in the informal vocabulary of people who had known his story, only through the version that served the powerful. Malik had left Briarfield not because he was running, but because there was nothing in the city that would hear him, and he had needed to become the kind of person who could make something be heard. He had taken his accounting degree and gone to work for audit firms, then for state compliance offices, then eventually as an independent contractor who specialized in public procurement, in finding the distance between what a contract said and what the money actually bought. He was good at it. He was patient with spreadsheets, the way his father had been patient with blueprints. He had been waiting for someone inside the system to give him what he could not get from outside. 3 months ago, Samuel Green had called. Samuel was 58, retired from the city's procurement office after 30 years, and he had the voice of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had decided he was too old and too tired to put it down the clean way, and too uncomfortable to keep it any longer. He had files, emails, payment records, bid documents that had been adjusted before publication, internal memos describing what the documents called strategic prioritization of established vendors, which was the bureaucratic phrase for arranging competitive bidding so that one company always won. He had 11 years of it. He had Victor Sloan's company on the winning end of every significant infrastructure contract in Briarfield. He had the money going out, the smaller amounts going back in, through donation routes disguised by 3 layers of non-profit structure. And he had the email that mattered most, the one that showed Richard Calder acknowledging, in writing, that an inspection report had been modified before it was filed. He chose the Meridian because it was the kind of place where the Calder family's people ate, and therefore the kind of place where nobody would think to look for someone giving Malik Brooks a reason to come back to Briarfield. Malik arrived at 7:43 in the evening. He wore a charcoal suit, a white shirt, no tie. He carried a leather briefcase that was old enough to show its use, the straps darkened with handling, the brass clasps dulled to a quiet finish. He ordered water and sat with the briefcase under his hand and waited. The restaurant around him had the deliberate calm of a place that had decided simplicity was a luxury. Cream tablecloths, low warm light, a bar at the back corner, where 2 men in their 50s were having a conversation at the exact volume that says we assume no one here would be interested. Malik did not look at them. He was watching the door. What he did not anticipate was Preston Calder. The mayor's son came in at 10 minutes to 8 with 4 other men, the entrance of a group accustomed to entrances, loud without being raucous, easy in a space they treated as belonging to them, because spaces in Briarfield had always behaved as if they did. The maitre d', Anthony Bell, moved immediately to greet Preston the way restaurants greet people whose fathers they do not want to displease. Preston was 33. He wore a suit that fit in the way expensive things fit, which is to say it looked like it had been constructed specifically for the existence he intended to have. He had his father's talent for entering a room, as if the room had been waiting. He was not unintelligent. He was the kind of person who uses intelligence primarily to confirm what he already believes. He moved through the restaurant toward the VIP section and stopped. His gaze found Malik in the way a scan finds something out of expected sequence. What Malik saw in Preston Calder's face was not rage and not contempt exactly. It was the specific expression of a person who has grown up in a place where certain arrangements were understood, and who experiences the presence of someone who does not fit those arrangements as a category error that needs correcting. Preston said, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "Standards must have dropped." One of his friends laughed. Another said something about the VIP section being open to City Hall protesters these days. Malik did not look up from the glass of water in front of him. Preston picked up his champagne glass and walked over. He stood at the edge of Malik's table. "Do you think you belong here?" he said. Malik looked up at him. "I have a reservation," Malik said. "A reservation," Preston said, and the word in his mouth was something he was returning damaged. "Doesn't make you matter." Malik set down his water glass. "Fortunately," he said, "I didn't come here to matter to you." Something shifted in Preston Calder's face. He was accustomed to a specific sequence. You say a thing. The person adjusts. The room understands who is setting the terms. This person was not adjusting. He was simply sitting at a table, as if Preston's opinion of whether he belonged there was not a variable he had decided to calculate. Preston leaned toward him. "My father should have finished what he started with your family a long time ago." Malik looked at him steadily. "He tried," he said. What happened next happened quickly and without announcement. Preston Calder's hand moved, and then Malik's head turned, and then there was a sound in the restaurant that was not loud, but that had the particular quality of sounds that stop other sounds, the way a door closing changes a room. Malik sat very still for a moment. He touched the corner of his mouth with 2 fingers. There was a small mark of red on the tip of his index finger. He looked at it. Then he took his phone from his jacket pocket. Preston said, "Are you calling security?" Malik dialed. The call lasted 31 seconds. "Eleanor, it's time. The Meridian, bring your team." He paused. "Yes, there are witnesses. There's camera coverage, and Preston Calder just did something useful." He ended the call and placed the phone face down on the tablecloth. Preston stared at him. The champagne glass in his hand had a slight tremor. "Who was that?" Malik rested his hands on the table. "The person your father has been trying not to meet for the past 3 months." The restaurant moved through 9 minutes in a particular kind of suspension, the way a room moves when something has happened that everyone present understands is not over yet. Preston went back to his table. His friends had quieted. One of them leaned in to say something, and Preston said something back that closed the conversation. Malik sat with his water and his briefcase and a white linen napkin he had pressed once carefully to the corner of his mouth and did not look at anything with urgency. At 9 minutes, the 3 black vehicles stopped outside on the street, and Eleanor Grant came through the door of the Meridian. She was 55 years old, the state's special investigator for municipal corruption, and she had the particular quality of a person who had spent decades in rooms that tried to make her feel small and had never found the effort convincing. She walked directly to Malik's table. She looked at his mouth. "Do you want to establish the assault record first, or deliver the files?" Malik said, "Both." Behind them, Preston Calder said nothing. He looked at Eleanor Grant with the recognition of someone who had heard the name in a context he had not thought would apply to him personally. Samuel Green came in through the side entrance, 40 seconds after Eleanor, his coat damp at the shoulders from the light rain that had started while he was walking from his car. He was carrying a brown envelope, and he moved like a man who had made a decision he was still making, each step a small act of will over the gravity of 11 years of not acting. When he saw the investigators, he stopped. Malik said his name quietly. Samuel came to the table. He set the envelope down in front of Eleanor without looking at Preston. Inside was the original email chain from the mayor's office. The USB with the metadata confirming the timestamps had not been altered. The list of 11 subsidiary companies traceable to Victor Sloan's primary corporation. The payment records, the donation records, the layered non-profit structure that moved money between them. And the internal memo from a senior member of the mayor's staff to a procurement officer describing what it called an adjustment to a site assessment summary that had originally been flagged as incomplete. The word adjustment was doing a great deal of work in that document. Eleanor opened the envelope and looked at the contents without touching them. Then she looked at Samuel. "Are you prepared to sign a statement?" Samuel looked at Malik for a moment. "I've been afraid for 11 years, he said. Malik said, "Then sign it afraid." Samuel sat down and signed. The night that followed was the beginning of what took weeks to fully set in motion. But the motion was irreversible from the moment Samuel Green put his name under the words he had been carrying since Richard Calder's first term in office. The Briarfield Calder administration moved quickly, the way administrations move when they understand that speed is their only remaining card. Dana Whitcomb, the mayor's communications director, issued a statement before midnight, describing Malik Brooks as an individual with a documented history of politically motivated conflict with the Calder administration. The statement used the word provocateur twice and referenced Leon Brooks' 2009 suspension as evidence of a family pattern. It was the wrong move. The camera footage from inside the Meridian was reviewed by Eleanor's team within 2 hours. It showed Preston Calder walking from his table to Malik's table. It showed Malik sitting with his hands folded. It showed the slap landing on a man who was not moving and not speaking. It showed Malik sitting afterward with the same composed stillness, looking at his hand, dialing a phone. There was no version of that footage that supported the word provocateur. Anthony Bell, the maitre d', who had stood frozen at the hostess station when it happened, gave a voluntary statement the following morning. He had been afraid of the Calder family's ability to make a restaurant's life difficult, and he understood that fear had made him a worse person than he wanted to be that night. He gave Eleanor the list of guests, the camera system access codes, and his own account without being subpoenaed. Grace Monroe, who covered Briarfield city governance for the regional paper, and had been blocked from 3 press briefings by Dana Whitcomb's office in the previous 2 years, began making calls before the sun came up. She published nothing until the documents from Samuel's envelope had been confirmed by 2 independent sources. because she was the kind of reporter who understood that the story that holds is built differently from the story that runs first. When she published everything. In Eleanor Grant's temporary office in the State Compliance Building, Malik opened his old leather briefcase a week after the restaurant. He removed the document that had lived inside it longest, Leon Brooks' infrastructure memo from 2009. 14 pages, typed and then annotated by hand in the margins, the handwriting careful and narrow, the kind of writing that belongs to a person who is used to recording things because he expects to need the record later. Malik placed the memo on the table alongside the email chain from Samuel's envelope. He read both documents not quickly. The contractor names matched. The inspection company matched. The name of the official who had signed the final acceptance report appeared in both the 2009 memo, as the person Leon had raised his concern to, and in a 2017 email from Samuel's collection discussing an adjustment to a site evaluation on a different project, using language that had clearly been used before because it had worked before. Leon Brooks had not seen a single incident of negligence. He had seen the beginning of a system. He had been silenced at the beginning of the system so that the system could continue. Eleanor said, after reviewing the comparison, "Your father's memo is materially supported by later evidence." Malik did not respond immediately. He had known his father was right. He had known it the way you know something when you are 10 years old and you watch a parent be taken apart by a process that does not care whether it is accurate, only whether it is convenient. He had known it and carried it and built his entire professional life around the tools he would need when the knowing was finally allowed to become evidence. He said, at last, "Thank you for saying it with documentation." The state oversight hearing convened 8 days after the incident at the Meridian. The chamber held more people than it was designed to hold comfortably. Reporters stood along the back wall. City employees occupied 2 full rows near the right side. A group of residents from the east side, the neighborhoods, where the promised infrastructure projects had been built on, and then inexplicably incomplete, when the final payments went through, sat together near the front, quiet, in the way people are quiet when they have come, because something finally matters enough to come for. Richard Calder sat in the first row in his navy suit, with his hands on his knees, and the expression of a man who had decided that composure was the last thing he had full control over. Preston sat behind him. He did not look like himself. Malik stood at the podium and did not raise his voice once in 47 minutes. He walked through 5 contracts. He explained each one in terms of what had been bid, what had been awarded, what had been built, and what had been paid for. He showed the gap between the specification and the delivery on the East Side Drainage Project, the Mercer Avenue supplemental work, the community center renovation in the Fieldstone district where 42% of the contracted scope was listed as complete in the acceptance report, and the site showed 31% physical completion on the date of sign-off. He showed the email chain from Samuel's envelope projected on the screen behind him, the date and sender visible, the text of the adjustment request legible from the back of the room. He showed the payment timelines matching the campaign contribution schedules, the companies that received infrastructure contracts appearing as donors to the mayoral campaign through nonprofit structures that placed 3 or 4 entities between the payment source and the contribution destination, enough distance to appear clean, not enough distance to withstand a forensic trace. He showed Leon Brooks's 2009 memo last. He read the relevant passage aloud. If this project is accepted as complete under the current documentation, his father had written, the city will not only pay for work that was not performed to specification, it will establish a precedent for a system that has already found its method and will not stop at one project. The room was very quiet. Richard Calder tried, twice, to characterize what Malik was presenting as politically motivated, as a family grievance, dressed in procedural language, as an attack on a record of accomplishment that the city should be proud of. He was not wrong that Malik had a family grievance. He was entirely wrong that the grievance was the evidence. The evidence was the evidence. One of the council members left the room during the presentation and did not return. Eleanor Grant confirmed when asked that a preliminary criminal investigation had been opened under state authority. Victor Sloan was subpoenaed. Dana Whitcomb was required to produce 18 months of communications records. Preston Calder faced a separate proceeding for the assault and for what investigators described as a pattern of conduct toward a material witness. The documents that Malik had laid before the oversight board were entered into the public record. This was what Richard Calder had feared most. Not the investigation, not the consequences to his own position or his son's. The thing he had arranged against carefully, for years, was the moment when the documents entered a record that he could not close. He had built his administration on the ability to control the narrative. He knew how to make inconvenient truths sound like personal animosity. He knew how to make a man sound unreliable until the man began to doubt his own account. He did not know how to make a spreadsheet sound unreliable. He did not know how to make a metadata timestamp change its date. He did not know how to make a signature on a check disappear from a bank record. The public record was the one door he could not lock. In the months that followed, 11 infrastructure contracts were frozen for audit. 2 procurement officials resigned. Victor Sloan's firm was removed from the active vendor list pending the investigation's outcome. Richard Calder announced the suspension of his re-election campaign, which everyone understood to mean that the campaign was over. The city council voted to commission an independent review of all major contracts in the preceding decade. Samuel Green received formal whistleblower status. He had been afraid to talk for 11 years, and he had talked, and the protection existed because it should, and he accepted it with the particular quiet of a man who knows he acted too late, and is grateful that too late was not the same as never. The sentence that stopped Malik longest appeared in the official state report. It read, Leon Brooks' 2009 infrastructure memo is materially supported by the evidentiary record, and should not have been characterized as unfounded. It was not a long sentence. It occupied one line of a 70-page document. It did not carry a formal apology or a posthumous recognition. It was the kind of sentence that a report produces when a fact has been established and must be recorded. Malik printed it. He placed it on the desk next to the photograph of his father that he kept in the inner flap of the briefcase. Leon Brooks in his work jacket, younger than Malik was now, at a desk with a sightbinder open in front of him. A man who did not look like he was trying to be anything other than what he was doing. Malik sat with both documents in front of him for a long time without speaking to anyone. In the weeks between the hearing and the formal rulings, Briarfield did something that cities rarely do cleanly. It waited. The oversight process moved at its own pace, neither accelerated by the attention it had received, nor slowed by the pressure that Richard Calder's remaining allies applied through their preferred channels. Eleanor Grant's team worked through the documents methodically, building what she called the architecture of accountability, meaning the documentation of who knew what and when, laid out in the sequence that a court would be able to follow without ambiguity. It was not dramatic work. It was the kind of work that looks, from the outside, like delay and feels from the inside, like the difference between justice and theater. Malik went home. He filed his own notes. He answered questions from Grace Monroe's reporting team and from 2 federal correspondents who had picked up the story after the hearing. He did not exaggerate, and he did not minimize. He said what the documents showed and referred everything else to the documents. He visited his father's grave on a Thursday morning, when the city was occupied with other things. He did not have anything particular to say. He stood for a while in the damp grass and looked at the stone, and thought about the particular loneliness of being right in a room that has decided you are wrong, the way that kind of loneliness does not feel like anger, but like something more fundamental, like the absence of language for a thing that is real, but will not be acknowledged. He thought about what it had cost his father to file that memo. Not the professional cost, which had been severe, but the internal cost, the question a person asks when they have seen something clearly and are told by everyone around them that their seeing is the problem. Whether you trust your own eyes enough to stand behind what you found when the standing becomes very expensive. Leon Brooks had trusted his eyes. His son had trusted the same thing, sharpened by time and method into a tool that could not be argued with, because it was not an argument. It was the record. 3 months after the hearing, the Mercer Avenue bridge was inspected by a third-party engineering firm. The original columns were found to contain the material inconsistencies Leon's memo had described in 2009. The remediation work was added to the list of contracted obligations the city was pursuing against the original contractor and its insurance. Near the pedestrian access ramp, on the west side of the bridge, a small commemorative panel was mounted on a concrete post. The text read, "Dedicated to public servants who told the truth before it was safe." It did not name Leon Brooks specifically. The city was not yet at the point of naming names in bronze. But in the formal public record, now accessible to anyone who looked, his name appeared in its correct context, as the inspector who had filed a memo accurately describing a structural deficiency, a memo that was dismissed by the office that should have acted on it, a dismissal that the subsequent evidence did not support. Samuel Green stood beside Malik at the bridge on a gray October morning. They stood at the pedestrian railing and looked at the water moving below the repaired structure. The bridge was ordinary, in the way that fixed things are ordinary. It did not announce what it had been through. Most people crossing it would not notice the work in the supplemental columns, or know what the original had cost the city, and not just financially. They would simply cross, because that was what bridges were for, and because the people who had ensured it was safe had done their work without requiring an audience. That was what Leon Brooks had tried to do, once. The Community Oversight Committee, established as part of the council's post-investigation commitments, had included, at Malik's suggestion, a standing seat for a representative of the East Side neighborhoods. The first person appointed to that seat was a woman who had attended every public meeting where the drainage projects were discussed, and had never, in 26 years, received an explanation for why work listed as complete had not been completed on her street. She would now be in the room when contracts were reviewed. Malik knew it was not a complete remedy. Systems built to exclude do not become inclusive simply because a committee adds a seat. But starting conditions mattered. And the starting condition had changed. Samuel said, "I wish I had spoken sooner." Malik was quiet for a moment, looking at the water. "Wishing doesn't change what came before," he said. "But your testimony changed what the record says now." Samuel nodded. His eyes were red at the corners, and he did not try to conceal it. "Your father deserved better from people who knew." Malik looked at the water a little longer before responding. "He deserved better from the whole system," he said. "But yes, also from people who knew." Samuel accepted that without argument, because it was true, and he had carried it long enough to understand that accepting it was the only honest thing left. Back in his office, Malik opened the briefcase one more time that afternoon. He removed the old memo. He set it next to the hearing document, with the one-line sentence about material support. 2 documents. One from a man who had been told his careful observation was a problem. One from a process that had finally been forced to say the observation was correct. The second had taken 14 years. Justice, in the systems Malik worked in, often took that long or longer. Sometimes it did not come at all, and the people who deserved it went to their graves still owed. This time it had come, not loudly, not with the drama that Preston Calder had, without meaning to, provided when he walked across the Meridian and raised his hand in front of 40 witnesses and a security camera, quietly. In the language of documentation and record and the particular weight of a sentence confirmed by evidence, entered into a public file available to anyone who cared to look. Malik put the memo back in the briefcase. He closed the clasp. He was not finished. There were other cities, other files. Other systems that had learned how to hide the distance between what they promised and what they delivered. There would always be more work of this kind. But the work in Briarfield was done. His father's name was in the record now. Not as a troublemaker, as a man who had been right. They had slapped Malik Brooks in a restaurant because they thought a man who sat still was a man who would absorb what was done to him and not respond. They thought silence was the same as submission. They thought the power of a family name was the same as the truth. They were wrong on all three. A quiet man with a leather briefcase is sometimes the most dangerous thing in a room. Not because he is angry, because he has been patient long enough to understand exactly what he is holding and exactly when to open it. Leon Brooks had told the truth before it was safe. His son had waited until the truth was documented. Both of them had been right. Both of them, in the end, had the record to prove it. Thank you for watching. This channel is no longer supported by ads, and these stories continue because people believe they matter. Patreon is a quiet way to support the work with early access, story previews, and small moments of input before each tale is fully told. On screen now is a preview of the Patreon page. If you'd like to support the channel, the invitation is in the first pinned comment down below. I'll see you in the next story.